In my previous assignment before coming here to Stillwater, I served for about 10 years as the president of Bishop Kelly High School in Tulsa. And like most parishes who have a patron saint, ours being the great St. Francis Xavier, Bishop Kelly High School also had a patron saint, and it was St. John Baptist de La Salle. St. John Baptist de La Salle is the founder of the Brothers of the Christian Schools, more commonly known as the Christian Brothers. De La Salle came from a rich family in his native France, and because of his wealth, his intelligence, his connections, he was on the fast track to the upper echelons of the church hierarchy in 17th century France. Then one day, on the steps of his church, he met a young man who was poor and uneducated. De La Salle was convicted. He wanted to do something, and so he started a school. He got some other men, his first brothers, to join him in this effort of teaching. As a result of that encounter and the move to teach this one boy and a few others, a movement began. One school turned into two, two into three, three into 20, all over France. After the success in France, other countries reached out to De La Salle and said, "Can you come here? Can you send some brothers here? We too have that same need." The Christian Brothers and the schools they founded are today in 82 countries, teaching over 1 million students a year. On his deathbed, the story is told of St. John Baptist de La Salle that he said to his friends, "This life has been very difficult. I've faced hardships and persecution, and if I had known how hard it would be, I likely never would have started." If he had known how hard it would be, he never would have started. But he did start, one step at a time. God led him to one place. Just teach this kid. Just start this school. He followed that prompting, and it led to a worldwide movement, one step at a time. To be a follower of Jesus Christ is to follow the promptings that God gives us here and now. We don't always know where they will lead, but we take the next step and trust that this next step is for our well-being. Simon, Andrew, James, and John, their next step was to drop their nets to follow Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." But imagine if he had said, "Come after me, and 3 of the 4 of you will die a violent death. Simon, you'll be crucified. James, you'll be stabbed to death. And Andrew, you're going to be crucified too." The story might be very different. We might be hearing about how St. John followed Jesus and how Peter, James, and Andrew went back to their subpar fishing careers. But they didn't. They took the next step, and their journey ended as saints. My encouragement to you this week is to take the next step in the practice of your faith. Following Jesus Christ is a daily action. It is never finished. It continually requires a fresh commitment. For us as a parish, this following of Christ takes new forms with a new pastor, a new church home on the horizon, and we don't know exactly what path that will take. There will be bumps, even valleys in the road for us as a parish. We've had them in the past, we'll have them in the future. But knowing that Christ is calling us together to take the next step and to trust. Since I arrived 10 days ago, many people have been asking for my thoughts on this or that plan. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? To many of those questions, I don't know the final response. I only know what that next step is going to be. And so that's the step we take, one at a time. Now back to you. If, as a follower of Christ, you are ever content with your relationship with Jesus, if you ever think, I've arrived, I am a true follower of Christ, and I can go no further, you're wrong. We're dealing there with the sin of pride that needs to be rooted out. We can always go deeper in our relationship with Christ, always. We can go deeper by taking the next step. So what does that next step look like for you? What's your next step? Maybe it's going to confession more regularly, or going to confession at all. Maybe that's your next step. Maybe your next step is praying more regularly, praying daily or twice daily. Maybe it's spending time in adoration of our Lord. Maybe it's picking up that rosary off the shelf or off the nightstand and putting it to use. Maybe it's dusting off that Bible and reading one of the Gospels. Maybe it's making yourself more available for the poor and for the vulnerable. Maybe your next step is discerning a call to the priesthood, the religious life, or the diaconate. Maybe it's a firm commitment to come to Mass every Sunday. Every Sunday. Maybe you're not Catholic, and you're ready to inquire about how you might come into full communion with the church that Christ founded. Maybe it's paying more attention to a particular vice, a particular sin that's keeping you away from a deeper relationship with the Lord. No doubt it will look different for each person, but I encourage you to not leave this church today without an idea and a firm purpose to take the next step in your life of faith. We heard in the first reading that Jonah set out from the great city of Nineveh. He didn't know his mission. He took the next step. God said, just go to Nineveh and I'll tell you what's next when you get there. And that's what he did. Simon, Andrew, James, and John, they didn't know where it would lead, but they dropped their nets. In moving to Stillwater and becoming your pastor, I found out that I have really two next steps in my faith. My next step to growing in my relationship with Christ was to find more time for quiet prayer in the morning before the day gets going. In my previous life in Tulsa, I didn't spend enough time in prayer. I wanted to, but I didn't. My next step as I moved here is to try to get to church early in the morning and spend some time in prayer before Mass begins. I also gave away my television. For me, it was a distraction from my work, from this great task of being your pastor. Now, I'm not telling you to be at church early in the morning. I'm not telling you to give away your television. I'm telling you that those were my next steps. What are yours? St. John Baptist de La Salle started a school. John, Andrew, Simon, and James dropped their nets. What's your next step to grow in your love of Jesus Christ? Don't leave this church today without a resolve to step out in faith, to take the next step so that you can be the follower of Christ that he so desires you to be.